Good afternoon, and welcome to the Brand Storytelling live streams for April 15th, 2020. I'm Rick Parkhill. Thanks for being with us. The live streams air every Wednesday beginning at 12 p.m. Pacific time. Our mission is to deliver the most timely and relevant information for our community of brands and their storytelling partners. These shows are designed for you. Please let us know how we can help serve you by suggesting future topics and guests that would help you now and into the future. Please just drop me a line. I'm Rick at BrandStorytelling.tv. That's Rick at BrandStorytelling.tv. Looking forward to your ideas for topics and guests that you'd like to see in the future. This afternoon, we're taking a look at Gen Z and how COVID has impacted their lives, their media habits, what they expect from their favorite brands, and much more. Chris Stefanyk will kick things off for us and provide some fresh survey results from the Wattpad Gen Z panel. And then we'll be joined by Ava McCartney, who's Director of Content at Tinder, and John Gates, VP Content Director from Digitas, and a special guest from the Gen Z community, Riley Parkhill. Yes, she is my daughter and is home here finishing her junior year at the University of Missouri. So we have a real live Gen Z person to validate some of these data points and give her perspective as well. So Chris, thanks so much for being here and sharing the survey results. Take away the screen, Chris, and it's all yours. Thank you.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Rick. And obviously thanks to the Brand Storytelling crew for putting this on and bringing us all together, every Wednesday now, which I think has been a great initiative. So thanks, Drew, Rick, the whole crew. Hey everyone. Firstly, just want to hope everyone's kind of staying safe, healthy during these crazy times. Obviously, we need these types of activities more than ever. So thanks for logging in. I'm going to share my screen now, go through some slides. I promise it'll be about 10 minutes max, and then we'll get to the panel as everyone looks to hear from myself and obviously a real Gen Zer. So hopefully we're all good on the screen share and take notes, think of questions. Obviously, we're looking forward to a pretty interactive panel. So as mentioned, Wattpad went and kind of executed on some research fairly quickly around how COVID-19 is impacting Gen Z, their perceptions, behaviors, and how they're perceiving brands right now. So we actually did this study a couple of weeks ago. So this is really hot off the press. Quick kind of 30-second 101 on Wattpad. I saw the registration list. I know there's a lot of friends of the family on the line, so bear with me, but I think there's some folks that this might be new to. So Wattpad is the world's largest social network of readers and writers. So essentially a social network where folks can come and engage with long-form content. We're over 80 million monthly users, largely Gen Z female that are just hyper obsessed with narrative content. And so we have two external facing parts of the business: Wattpad Studios, which is tasked with looking at the over 665 million uploads on the platform and determining what content we want to take to our partners in Hollywood, like Hulu, Sony, and others. And we also have a book publishing arm called Wattpad Books on that side of the business. And then we have Wattpad Brand Partnerships, which is the team that I manage. And we essentially are looking for to determine the most creative and authentic ways in which brands can insert themselves into our community and talk to our audience through a collection of both ad and branded content products. If you want to know more, feel free to reach out, message me, or Chris at wattpad.com is the easiest way to get a hold of me. So today we'll be discussing Gen Z. We went deep on a number of different areas: how they're feeling, how they're spending their time, how they expect brands to act in this time, how is this changing their spending habits, how is this changing their behaviors kind of at large. And so we'll be diving into all of this. And I don't know if Rick mentioned at the beginning, but we'll be following up with a bit of a deeper kind of report tomorrow that kind of provides a lot of the information we're sharing today. So firstly, how is Gen Z feeling right now? And interestingly enough, the number one feeling that they were expressing was boredom. So about 66% said that they were feeling bored during this time, which I thought was a bit unique to this generation. But 2, 3, 4 are feelings of stress, anxious, loneliness, something we're probably all feeling during this unprecedented time, which I thought was kind of interesting. Well, moving forward, we also asked them how they're spending their time at home, and what we saw is a substantial increase in terms of the amount of time they're spending reading, listening to music, and consuming social media. So, I mean, we did survey Wattpadders, as mentioned, we're a reading and writing platform, so this shouldn't be too much of a surprise. But if you look a little bit further down the graph, you'll see learning new things online, which interestingly enough, I mean, the more time and same amount of time was fairly similar at just over 30%, which I found a bit interesting. This paired with what was on the previous slide, boredom, I think makes a lot of sense to me that this generation is looking to find and learn new skills, given that they probably have some more free time. And this packaged with the fact that this generation is probably feeling a lot of uncertainty around their job prospects, particularly, if you're in post-secondary education and about to graduate. And I 100% know this is something we'll be talking about with Riley and the others afterwards. And I think it's interesting to see how brands can kind of play a role here. How does Gen Z expect brands to support during COVID-19? So good segue. By far and large, this generation is expecting brands to kind of donate something, right? So 2/3 were expecting them to donate supplies. Over 40% was expecting them to donate money. So really doing good in the world, it starts there. I think we all know that, right? Right now, we all need to be doing our part at an individual level and at a corporate level. And that came out loud and clear through the survey. But what I also found interesting, and given the community of folks that are on this call, 1/3 said they were open to brands kind of creating new entertaining content to read or watch. Given that a lot of us are brand storytellers, I think this sends a pretty clear message. Again, tying this back to kind of the boredom piece at the beginning. This generation and a lot of us are looking for content on end right now. And so it could pose an interesting opportunity for brands or production companies to try to put new content in the world in a creative way. And we're seeing this already through like a number of spots, initiatives, and small kind of short films I've been seeing pop out. I mean, the one that pops to mind is Frito-Lay came out with their We're All People, or It's All About People kind of spot earlier, which was like a 1-minute spot, very heartfelt. And I think just a great example of shooting something from obviously various like home locations. And I think it's been great to see this community and the community of storytellers get kind of creative around production over the last couple of weeks. So how has Gen Z's spending habits changed? Not a shocker that close to 50% are spending less than they were in a pre-COVID environment. Close to 1/5, or 20.4%, are spending more, according to the survey we did. I've been seeing some additional research come out about this that kind of echoes a similar sentiment, that there is a group of folks, particularly Gen Z, that are spending more now. In fact, there was some Canadian research that came out the other day that really focused on this. And the key takeaway was actually, Gen Z females are spending more time shopping online, particularly amongst clothing and cosmetics. Again, probably what we all would guess, but it's good to see that kind of validated. And then additionally, we're seeing more of this generation really feel the need to shop local. Again, I think a lot of us are probably feeling that expectation, and this came through with about 34% of this generation feeling the pressure to shop locally at this time. And I think, for those on the call or for those that are working with big brands, I think this is really interesting and something that folks will have to navigate, particularly if you're coming from an organization that maybe has pulled back on spend or isn't really taking place in the conversation right now. There's certainly a good debate to be had whether that's the case as folks look to kind of shop locally. How is Gen Z maintaining relationships with their friends? So this generation, we've always felt that it's pretty seamless, right? Is there a delineation between their online selves and their digital selves and who they are in person, right? This generation came out of the womb with a phone in their hand, basically, right? So what this survey kind of showed us in some of the more open comments is that this generation is obviously still starved in real life communication and in IRL experiences. And I think coming out of this, there's going to be a real continued need to experience things in person, and I think they're really going to appreciate this more than they did prior, coming from a fully digital kind of generation. What do things look like when they return to normal for this brand? What are they looking forward to? Again, some of this we probably could predict, but funny enough, they're looking forward to going back to work and school. They're looking forward to seeing and hugging their friends, going outside, going to restaurants, going to movies. And I think this presents, again, another interesting opportunity around how we as brand storytellers, whether or not storytelling through video, text, or physical experiences, insert themselves authentically into this like first moment of normalcy, right? I think there's going to be the continued movement to IRL experiences once we're over this pandemic, and certainly that presents a lot of opportunities for brands to do something special to celebrate that, which may seem far away now as we look at the news cycle, but something I think we should all be thinking about. And then we looked at how this has changed Gen Z's outlook on life. And there was a really clear kind of appreciation for the small things, and what I would almost call like an interesting layer of like gratitude that came through in a lot of the comments, where people were just really looking forward to being hugged again, or just doing a small act of kindness for their neighbors. Like, it really was great to kind of see that come through here. And in addition, we also saw, which we highlighted at the bottom here, the last second, was obviously a number of users being worried about high job loss rates. Do they have to kind of seek self-employment coming out of this? And I think this again plays into what I know will be a conversation later about how does this generation's perception around employment kind of change coming out of here, because this will be a generation defining experience for them, as for a lot of us, particularly those that are either entering into college or are on the verge of graduating. And I think it's something that us as brands and just frankly professionals need to be thinking about, and how we support this next generation. And then also we saw that the Gen Z is obviously having increased skepticism amongst the media and government. They've always kind of had this from our research, but I think it's been heightened during this time of uncertainty. And coming out of it, I think we're just going to continue to see this generation be a little bit more thoughtful around how they're consuming information, where they're consuming it, making sure they're going to trusted sources, because right now we're almost inundated from the news cycle that's going on. It can be a bit tiresome, I think, as we all know. And it's been great actually to see various platforms and step up to make sure that the right information is being surfaced. I know, for example, Snap's been doing a lot about this in terms of pulling in trusted sources into their discovery feed. Read a lot about that this week. So I think hats off to all of us on the platform side to try to do our part around getting true and trusted information in front of not just Gen Z but everyone. And then, as expected, Gen Zs are stepping up to help their community, whether or not it's supporting the elderly or teaching younger folks or ensuring that those vulnerable in their community having food and resources. It was great to see people openly share these stories when we surveyed them. And to me, the biggest takeaway for this, me personally, was in this time of unpredictability and uncertainty, we need positive storytelling more than ever. And it's great to see individual stories like this come up. It's great to see brands start sharing what they're doing, and very much from like an openness perspective. And I expect we continue to see that through marketing messages and just general storytelling over the coming kind of days and weeks, which for me personally has just been very nice to see. And I think it's important to surround ourselves with that type of content. So as we kind of wrap this up, there are a number of key takeaways for brands. So the first one being, you can't sit on the sidelines. I think that's become pretty clear over the last 5 weeks. People, the community, this generation are expecting you to do something. This particular survey said, donating supplies or money is at the top of the list, but I think there's a lot of different avenues that could be taken here. we can curb Gen Z's boredom by providing engaging content. I think that might be the most interesting takeaway for this group and everyone on this call, right? I think there's real need for this, and I think I've been inspired to see like our peers continue to be innovators around how to produce content given the restrictions that are kind of in place. And we need to continue to provide access to opportunities to help or celebrate those who are, right? I think Gen Z wants to help, and so can brands figure out a way to help them help, which is almost like a perfect kind of equation there. And then lastly, we're all starving for connection. This generation in particular considers the level of boredom they've expressed. And, you know, we're seeing continued increases in engagement across, like, obviously Netflix Party, House Party, all those types of apps. But I think brands figuring out the right way to bring this generation together virtually is absolutely needed, as we all are kind of responsible for this. And, you know, this being a great example right now, how we've all come together digitally to have a discussion. So with that, I wanted to share a fun quote that Riley mentioned to me that really made me think yesterday when we were kind of chatting about the survey, and that can be the segue into the conversation. So thanks for listening. I think I was maybe a couple minutes over 10 minutes there, but hopefully that gave a lot for people to chew on, and I'll pass it over to Rick to kind of start the panel conversation.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And let's bring the other guests in now as well. Ava and John and Riley, come join us. There they all are. Thank you very much. So Chris, one of the first questions I think comes up is, you know, how different is this? Are these data results from Gen Z to, you know, other generations? You know, how is this unique? I think everyone's feeling a little bored. Everyone's feeling like they want brands to do something. What's happening with the Gen Z group that's really that's unique in everyone's opinion?
Yeah,
Ava, it's some opinions.
Yeah,
about you, I think.
I know Ava has an opinion about this, so I'll maybe pass it over to her. But I think there's a lot of similarities in here. I think across generations, I think there's certain things to pick apart. But I know Ava's got thoughts, so maybe she can kick us off.
I think that, you know, everyone is being affected by this in different ways. I would say a lot of the data points we saw about boredom and about looking for opportunities to learn things and things that are in this deck and other deck are universal. I think that Gen Z in a way feels gypped, perhaps in a way that older generations don't, because of the experiences they're missing out on, whether that be attending college or graduation, those physical moments. But what I think is particularly interesting is that we have, for a long time, as people marketing to Gen Z, been told that the digital and real life divide within this digitally native group, who, as you mentioned, were born with technology in their hand, doesn't exist. And I think that this pandemic is testing the limits of that assertion, because we are seeing people who are craving in-person human connection, who are feeling bored, who are feeling unhappy to be at the behest of only the technology.
Right. Riley, are you feeling bored?
I think that's probably the least creative way to describe what I'm feeling right now. I definitely do feel gypped in a way. I'm a junior at the University of Missouri. I just turned 21. You can see the banner behind me. You know, I'm finally legal.
Threw you a party.
Yeah. You know, I had to leave college. I go to a SEC school. It's kind of a fun activity for us. And a lot of my friends are graduating this year too, and I won't get to see them again on campus. So that's kind of a big thing for us. The gypped feeling definitely does resonate. Everyone wants to be back on campus. I definitely want to be back in my apartment with all of my roommates. But this is a generation defining moment for us. I would say the main thing that I feel probably right now is, you know, my life is lacking in a way.
Hey, John, how do you feel about this, and what are you seeing in other groups? Do you feel like this is, what parts of this are unique to Gen Zers?
Yeah, I mean, we you know, work with a lot of brands who deal with older generations equally with as they do with Gen Z, and you know, just thinking of it from the perspective of that audience, you know, being not as burdened with, family life and what your work situation might be. Just sort of put the whole different spin on when you want to think about marketing to, folks who are have to be stuck at home from college versus trying to, do teleconferencing while kids are running around. It's an important thing to really know your audience in that sense, because you're just dealing with a whole different set of priorities. And to me, like these results I'm hearing from Riley about the frustrations is very revealing. I think the point is well taken about, when we thought about marketing to Gen Z, we would think about what are the new technologies, what are the new social platforms, how do we reach them digitally, and thinking of them as those like really digital natives. And now I think there's going to be sort of a scar as we go forward that we want to think about. How are we speaking to them knowing that they've gone through this formative experience that, for a lot of us with more perspective, this is weird and crazy, but there's also years and years before that to sort of temper that. Whereas, you're going to have people like Riley who are growing up that when you want to tell them, what's important, which is sort of what our marketing is trying to do, you have to take into account that they've been through this experience at a really, really critical time in their lives. That's just the sort of psychological perspective on it. And then there's, of course, also the very, very real economic and, just where they can, just life trajectory, the actual impact of these things happening, where, being able to complete school and find a job and things like that are going to be so different than they would have been had this not happened. So I think for brands, it comes down to like really being conscious and thinking about the impact of these times on this generation and adapting accordingly in a way that, like, if you're not to say a grown up, but like an older, somebody from an older generation, you may not have that perspective, and it's the part of your life that it's impacting is so outsized for people who are just starting out.
Yeah, one other thing that I've seen, not in this particular deck, but that in other ones, as there are many going around, about how Gen Z is looking at this, is that one of the things they're looking to companies and corporations for beyond marketing is how people are treating their employees, and whether especially big businesses, in addition to giving back to their communities, are giving back internally. And it's interesting when you think about that in the realm of a distrust in news and a distrust in media, and a generation that we know already valued entrepreneurship probably more than any generation before.
One of the data points about what do Gen Zers want from brands right now, and it's really, I think it's what everybody wants, is they want to see them take action. Don't tell us what you're going to do. Just go do the things that are going to support us right now. We have a question from the audience. Janie Tong asks, is there a brand which has stood out positively for Gen Z during this time? And on the flip side, is there a brand that stood out negatively? Who do we admire out there? What brands do you see that are doing the right thing for the Gen Z audience?
Yeah, I can jump in. This one's always a tough one as people think about it. I was on another one of these yesterday listening, and I had a gentleman from Google that really walked through everything they're doing, and obviously considering, that just their news cycle over the last 18 months. I mean, they've put 800 million, I think, towards various relief, and it's been pretty impressive. And I think you can go to google.com/COVID-19, and it's like another splash page they've created that outlines everything they've done. And it's when you actually just dive into it, it's pretty amazing. So obviously our biggest companies should be doing the most, and I think I've been impressed with them kind of stepping up, which has been pretty amazing. And then the counterpoint to that is I've actually been impressed by the local like smaller organizations that have just changed their manufacturing setup, right? Like we've got a local Toronto-based distillery that just moved and like started making hand sanitizer really quickly. So I think, like, again, to wrap it all up, it's like everyone from big to small needs to play their part, and I've seen it. Obviously there's probably a lot that's caught in the middle there, but yeah, two opposite end of the spectrum examples that come to mind.
Riley, you mentioned a brand that you liked the other day. What was that?
Yeah, I mentioned that I go to University of Missouri, so Anheuser-Busch is kind of a at-home company for me. I have a lot of friends that are from St. Louis. So seeing, they put out a commercial, I think like a couple weeks ago, saying that they were partnering with the Red Cross and opening up sports stadiums to facilitate blood donations. I thought that was a great idea. That's not just showing something for any generation. It's really just trying to help people now. I think that's what a lot of people want to see, regardless of how old you are or where you come from. I think that's just really important, and it makes you feel like you can do more for your community. And I thought that was really nice.
Not only do they make good beer for college students, they do good things. You got to admire a brand like that. We have another question from the audience. Gina Utaro asked, there's a lot of content clutter right now on social. Are Gen Z feeling exhausted by social media during this time or comforted by it?
I can take a look. I would say both. And I would say that's equally true of millennials and maybe certainly Xers, maybe even boomers. I've started to see, and news sources have seen this too, there was this huge interest in things around COVID-19, even if they were humorous, even if they were meme-based, even if they weren't earnest. And I think that people now are transitioning a little bit back into this being the new, albeit hopefully temporary normal. So they are actually looking for all kinds of content on social and on site and video on YouTube around how to be that normal now. So basically how to connect and how to do things without being outside, without disobeying stay-at-home orders unless they are essential workers. But it does not have to be about social distancing or wearing masks. It can be like, what are these really cool pantry staples that you can make a recipe with? Or what is YouTube's spoken to how they've seen the with me trend, so people doing at home with me and finding those communities in the social space.
Yeah, one thing what we're seeing on our end too is a real, we're a bit different, right? I think like, yes, people are going to various platforms to find real news and trusted news. We're seeing like a real need just to like consume and want to consume like positive stories. And I alluded to that in the presentation, but this aspect of like escapism through social, whether or not it's like a fictional story on Wattpad or a TikTok challenge, right? Like I think people, one, they want to be entertained and they don't want to just be like in the endless news cycle loop. And so that to me, I think is great. And I think something interesting for everyone here to like internalize, because the news cycle is getting more tiresome by the day. And I think we all need to like play our part to like improve our psyches around it.
You know, I have to think that, you know, Gen Zers, I mean, I read an article the other day about, you know, kids, seniors in high school that aren't going to get to graduate this year, that maybe going off to college and their college plans just got torn out from underneath them. Instead of going off to college, they're going to stay home and help support their families. They're going to have to look for jobs. You know, this young generation is presented with so much turmoil and derailment that, you know, how can, I mean, this whole discussion is about what can brands take from this? You know, how can brands help this generation and lift them up and give them hope and support? How do they do that? Through action, through messaging? You know, what's your advice to brands? John, what are you telling clients?
Yeah, I think that it's important to look at it in two ways. There's the near term where we kind of know what everybody's situation is. We're all universally stuck at home. And so you see content on all the channels sort of addressing that. But then there's the long term, and having a distinct plan, even as the brands themselves are going through some crises. Like I'm working with brands that, you know, are, you know, in the QSR space, which is really troublesome right now. You know, other brands our agency represents are in the financial sector. So there's a kind of a mix of like everything is, you know, trying to adapt to this immediate situation, and how do we talk to people who are stuck in a scenario where we know exactly what's happening to them. But then looking forward beyond that, I think we may have to look to some past examples like the 2008 financial crisis of, you know, how did the audiences, people recover from that, and what were their trajectories, and how did we need to speak to them and you kind of use that as a template here, because I think we're going to see some of that, like after we get past the level 1 health crisis, you know, is what's on people's minds. Level 2, you know, going deeper is going to be, what are the ramifications of that, and how is that going to be, you know, affecting people? And I think it's kind of about understanding their changed priorities and using that as a map to understand how to talk to them. And so if people are, you know, out of work, I mean, I don't want to go into like a whole, you know, spiral about, you know, what those scenarios are, but if economics are a concern for people, you know, we need to use that as a sort of Rosetta Stone to talk to them with. If it's sort of about global issues that are happening, you know, we may want to use that. But I think it is about mapping out the trajectory of the audience based on what's happening now, thinking ahead into the future, and using that as sort of a way to predict what people will be interested in, and plan around that, essentially.
And Rick, the kind of things you're talking about are bigger systematic issues that have to do with the affordability of college, which was clearly an issue before this and continues. In 2019, Tinder took a role advocating to pass the Equality Act, because inclusivity is at the core of our brand tenets, and that was a huge campaign. It had activations and it had really fun stuff that was digital and IRL, but it also had a cause and a lobbying and finances behind it. And I think that if brands really want to connect, more than hosting like a digital graduation because you're missing your graduation, they would be smart to think about where they're putting their dollars and their resources in terms of advocating for global, national, even local change in a way that can serve their communities and some of those issues that they're experiencing.
Okay, we have another question from the audience here. Michelle Fino asks, as a parent of one Gen Z and one Gen Alpha, are we collectively looking for content that we can all consume together, Gen Z and Gen X in my case, or are we seeing content consumption more divided across the generations than ever before? Any opinions on that? We need content that we can all appreciate at the same time and talk about as a group, as a family.
Yeah, and hi Michelle, thanks for logging on. Yeah, of course you'd come with a tough question. I think it's challenging, right? When you throw alpha in the mix there, I think it throws me a loop, frankly, because they're so young, right? And like, you know, you need to be protective of what content they're probably consuming. But I think there is a bit of interesting through lines happening from like Gen Z to millennial, probably to the Xers, right? Like Tiger King would be the obvious example. It really feels like from an overall content consumption standpoint, there's certain like big Netflix shows and things like that that are like owning the conversation right now, because we are so starved for content, which again presents opportunity for content creators, period, right now to try to own a through line. I think alpha, there's a whole parental side of things that probably would warrant a discussion, but that'd be my immediate reaction. I just think, like, granted how much content's being consumed and the desire for new stuff that's entertaining, there probably can be a through line if done correctly.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a universal desire for shared experiences, and with especially live sports going away, you know, the NBA playoffs are not happening. There's a rush to fill the void, both on the part of the audiences, but also by brands and content creators. And so that's a big area that, you know, we're talking about with brands about exploring, is how do you replace those shared experiences? And I think the Tiger King is a really hilarious example, because like they didn't plan it that way, but it just happened at the right time. Like I've seen it, everyone has talked about it. And you know, part of what's driving that is just that natural urge to have a shared experience with, as a way to connect with others. And so to the extent that brands can latch on to those sorts of things as they become as opportunities, or create them, you know, I think that's a really valuable thing to do. And that's something where in the past, you know, it may have been enough to just get enough eyeballs on something. But I think now I've always wanted to have create stuff that starts conversations. But now that's even more important because that shared experience is something that's so valuable to people that it'll be very memorable if you can do that.
Yeah, actually, that triggered something that's really interesting for me that I didn't get to in the presentation, but we're seeing that in our surveys as well. And so an interesting example, like we've all heard of the Netflix Party app, and I think that's a perfect example of a shared experience. We even saw anecdotally that like Gen Zers were creating like quarantine diaries in Google Docs and then sharing them out with other Gen Zers to like collectively have a shared experience around how they're feeling, thinking, or what they're doing. Which I thought was like something I necessarily hadn't seen in like the press or the trades. So another great example of John's point around just like that need right now. And I think, yeah, there presents opportunities for organizations or brands to potentially facilitate that type of stuff in a really genuine way.
You know, it's a really interesting phenomena right now is, I don't know, you've probably all seen this about MeTV, the cable network that shows all the old 60s reruns from Andy and Mayberry and Beverly Hillbillies, and their viewership is like tripled, quadrupled. People are finding comfort in watching these old shows from the 60s that are just simple entertainment. We've got them on every night, don't we, Riley?
Yeah, we're watching Andy show pretty much all the time.
Which begs a question about the use of comedy in marketing right now. It's like, when is it right to be funny, and when can you make light of situations? And because humor's been used so predominantly in marketing to Gen Z, is it time to do that right now? Or you have to be, I think, advice to brands about, comic relief. When is it right?
I mean, at Tinder, we've definitely seen continued engagement. If you just look at our social channels, totally public metrics on Instagram with humor. And one way that we've approached that, and I think has worked well, and this is something that Gen Z values, is being a part of the content. So being spoken with instead of spoken to. So what are those really funny user tweets that you can turn into pieces of content? Or what is like a TikTok video that then you can meme and put content around? Certainly you do have to be careful about what kind of humor that is as a brand, as opposed to if you were a meme account or an individual. But I would let your users and how people are acting take the lead. We launched our passport feature globally for free, and we've seen some really fun reactions to that we want to share. And it's a way to promote that feature and share it with more people. And it's a way to give spotlight to our users, and it seems like a win for everyone.
John, one of your big clients is Dunkin'. Can you share anything about what you're talking to them about, and how you approach comedy or not right now?
Yeah, no, I think it's funny. Like Dunkin' is usually a pretty lighthearted brand, or optimistic, I guess. And so I think that the optimism side of that is really coming through right now, rather than the lighthearted side. There's certainly, like, I think it's interesting if you go to the Dunkin's Twitter feed right now, there is the occasional sort of letting off steam of something a little lighthearted or funny, but it's really focused on local connections with it's a franchisee business, so all of the Dunkin' stores are owned by individual small business people across the country, and so there's quite a bit of activism, bringing coffee and donuts to hospitals, and you see hospitals tweeting when the Dunkin' truck comes by to give free coffee and donuts. That's a sort of a unique quirk to Dunkin', that it's so hyper local, but they are very much making that the main piece of communication out to the world about what's going on right now, thanking the individuals, the people who are on the front lines, especially for them as a brand, because most people are not going out right now. The sort of typical consumer traffic to stores is completely different than what it would otherwise be. And so they have an opportunity to focus on something that feels more important. And so as a brand, like that particular example may not track to all other brands, but it certainly in this time, at this moment, they're focused on this more serious side. But I do think that, everybody needs to blow off steam. Like that's really important. I guess my general advice would be that it's not always the brand's place to be at the forefront of blowing off steam. We can align ourselves with smart creators who are doing something that is fun and good. But I think, usually brands will take a more careful approach and try to do something that's right and, for lack of a better word, won't get them in trouble. But you can't deny that it's human nature. Like we still want to laugh even when something tragic is going on.
Yeah. I think it's a fine line. I think we saw that in some of the data points too, is that Gen Z doesn't necessarily think it's a good time to be funny. They think it's a good time for brands to just do the right thing and probably let the dust settle a little bit, so to speak. Larson Wenzel, ask a question for Riley. What's the most creative use of technology you've seen in your community?
That's a great question. Well, as we know, everyone's Zooming right now. That's not really very unique to any generation. One thing that I have seen that's pretty unique is that people will just like study together, and that's kind of nice. It's like I've talked to my roommates a lot, and it's just like we'll talk to each other about like what we're studying for and act like we're in our living room or something like that. So it's like we can be together. And my boyfriend at school, he's in a fraternity, so he lives in this huge fraternity house with a lot of other guys, and obviously he misses that. That's a very unique environment. They have a really close like technological relationship right now, and they all talk to each other, and they will Zoom and act like they're just in their room together playing video games. It's something that's, you're using things while you're doing it is what makes it so special. That's probably the most different thing that I've seen so far in this quarantine than anything else.
I've got another question for the panel from John Norwood. He asked, what are soon-to-be grads feeling towards the job market? Are they actively applying or waiting for the dust to settle? There's certainly a lot of angst out there in the community about what the future holds for jobs. And I don't know, and again, how does this relate to how brands treat them? I don't know how you connect those two dots there, but that's what this discussion's intended to do. Anybody?
That's got to be a Riley question to start.
Yeah. I'm not a soon-to-be grad this year, but I got a year. I'm currently looking for internships, though, so I was actively applying about a week ago. But getting all those emails back about people canceling their internships and their applications and everything is pretty disheartening. So I know that I stopped for a little bit. A lot of my friends are still continuing to try and just hoping that it'll go through. A lot of my other friends who applied for brands in the first semester of this year, they still have their programs going on for the summer, which will be very interesting. Again, that's in St. Louis, but I think they're a new hotspot right now, so we'll see if they continue with that. I know that a lot of my friends in senior year, they are getting a lot of their opportunities just postponed. Some of them are moving out to California to work for big brands as well, and they're just not thinking that's going to happen this summer. No one's really even traveling right now, so moving to a new location when all of this is happening, brands can't really expect people to do that. So I think everything's just kind of up in the air for my generation as well as everyone else's.
I saw a story today about an agency in Minneapolis that is offering internships, distant internships. So they'll be participating by Zoom and working from home. Interesting opportunity. Listen, we only have about a minute and a half left. I'd like to go through with all of you if there's any last minute suggestions or things that you would offer up to brands right now and that are Gen Z marketers. What's the best piece of advice you could give them, Chris?
Yeah, I think, it's very similar to what you said earlier, but it's obviously do something and do it for the sake that it's the right thing to do, not because you want to be putting a message behind it. I think you and I had a deep conversation about this in the prep call, but that's the expectation from not this generation, but the population at large, and really it's the morally right thing to do. So you do that and you figure out what you can offer to the world, and like good things will happen eventually, right? Like, and you can celebrate it later or share the right message later. But right now, I think everybody should be looking at, like, are you in a position of influence that can do something impactful right now, regardless of the company you're at, the role you're at, at your company, and then act on it. And if we all do that, we're going to come out of this thing, in a good place, and probably stronger and tighter than we've ever been. So I think that's been my kind of guidance and advice to everyone, is just do the right thing. The marketing benefit for that, you can think about later, but certainly you start there and the rest kind of should flow naturally.
Ava, how will you change your approach with Gen Z community, based on what we're learning and how they're feeling and what they're doing?
We are a platform that is about connection, and I think that we will continue to look for new ways for people to connect digitally as this continues, and whether that's connecting with people locally or more distantly, and to combat what we've seen as loneliness, something that we is highest in Generation Z than anyone. And so where can we show people that there are still opportunities to be human and to enjoy each other's company, albeit in new circumstances?
Thanks. John, what's top line for you and with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to encourage all our clients to sort of not just advertise, but to create, and to create opportunities for the audience to do something and feel good about what they're doing. It's not just messaging. I think, great examples are, creating, Chipotle is doing an activation this month where they're creating a online gaming tournament, giving people a chance to play, the new Call of Duty game. But the prize is a donation to the COVID charity of the winner's choice to support from Chipotle. And so I think that's like a great example of creating something that's fun for people to watch and participate in, but also has a purpose. And so having a purpose is, just to Chris's point, extremely important. If you're not with purpose, you are purposeless, and brands shouldn't be that.
Well, thank you. I want to thank all of you for your time. I want to thank the audience for joining us today. And I want to invite all of you to join us on Friday at 7:30 Eastern Time for a virtual storytelling happy hour. We're teamed up with the USA Today, and Megan Finnerty is going to host this hour-long session. Bring your favorite beverage. Riley, you can bring a Budweiser if you like. And we're going to select 5 storytellers, and each of them are going to tell a 5 to 8 minute story. It's got to be true. It's got to have happened to them. It's got to be fun and uplifting. So this is virtual storytelling Friday night. Come join us. If you've got a story you'd like to tell, raise your hand. Go to our website. You'll learn more. And hope to see you on our virtual storytelling hour on Friday night. Thanks everybody so much for participating. Be safe, wash your hands, and let's all be looking for the light here at the end of this tunnel. Thanks so much. Signing off.